Hello there. Right, for the past 2 weeks, we've been watching as 10 Conservative MPs have been vying for the position of leader of the Conservative Party, therefore, Prime Minister. And it's turned out that it's such a dull, uninspiring bunch without an inspirational word or idea between them. The only saving grace for these Conservative politicians is that the politicians in the Labour Party are even worse. In fact, if you were to take the top 10 Labour MPs and put them up against the Conservatives, they would make the Conservatives look positively like the founders of Mensa. But because of this sorry state of our MPs today, it's got me wondering, do we even need a politician to lead this country? If you look at the United States, their president isn't much of a politician, but they're doing well and he's doing okay. Because all we need in this country in a leader is somebody who's an astute businessman, somebody who is of decent character and holds decent morals, somebody who's a patriot and willing to put the UK and its people first, somebody who's untainted by association with political groups and the media and big corporations. Now, somewhere out there, there's definitely a viable candidate for that role, but alas, he's never going to get the job. And at the minute, we're down to two idiots, basically. So we're going to end up either with a Boris or a Jeremy. Now, I have a feeling it'll be Boris, so long as he can stop himself being hanged for having arguments with his missus. Whichever the two it is anyway, what I do know is what they need to be saying to the British public and the policies they need to be pursuing. Right? So the first thing that the new Prime Minister is going to have to deal with is clearing up the mess that is Brexit. Now there's two simple facts for Brexit. One, we had a vote and Leave won. Secondly, the EU don't want us to leave and will never give us a deal that suits us or will ever get through our treacherous parliament. So is there a solution to Brexit? Well, I do believe there is. So what the Prime Minister needs to do is this. He needs to ignore the Remain voters, because quite simply they lost. He needs to listen to the 17.4 million Leave voters. Yes, he needs to listen to the majority of the British people. He also needs to ignore the media, who practically to a man all favour Remain. He also needs to ignore big businesses whose globalist agenda requires us to stay in the EU and whose only interest is in the profits that cheap labour that's brought about by mass immigration can bring to them. So instead, he wants to be listening to the thousands and thousands of UK businesses who have no dealings with the EU but who still suffer because of the EU's ridiculous rules, regulations and restrictions. And he also needs to remember that countries like the United States and others who aren't in the EU deal with the EU on a daily basis. Do you honestly think the United States gets a bad deal from the EU? I doubt it. So our new leader, he needs to be brave and he needs to be strong in order to do what needs to be done, which is this. He needs to remove the Remainer MPs from the Brexit process. These same MPs who have hindered and sabotaged Brexit at every turn right from the off. Now I hear people saying, oh, you can't do that, we have a constitution, blah, blah, blah. Well, Brexit has pointed out one major fallacy of having a democracy in a country with a two-party system. And constitutions were made to be amended in exceptional circumstances. And Brexit now, with its impasse and its deadlock, is in exceptional circumstances. So it's time for some changes and it's time for an amendment. And it's time to send these Remainer MPs on an extended holiday, which no doubt they will enjoy. So in order for us to get anywhere moving forward on Brexit, the new Prime Minister and the Brexiteer MPs need to rectify the mistakes we've already made, which was to send and waste 2 years sending a Remainer Prime Minister under pressure from a Remainer media, Remainer MPs, Remainer Parliament, Remainer big corporations to the EU to kindly ask for a deal that was always going to benefit the EU over Britain and a deal that was never going to get through our treacherous Parliament. So now the new Prime Minister and his cohorts need to go back to the EU and they don't need to ask for a deal. They need to present our deal to the EU, a deal that benefits the UK and the UK people. Now, this deal will be rejected out of hand, no doubt. Then the Prime Minister needs to take us out of the EU straight away without a deal, just like should have been done a week after the referendum. We need to come out of the customs union, the single market, and fight for the best deal we can get on the Northern Irish border. And if we can't get a good deal on the Northern Irish border, then guess what? That's just life. Because from what I can see, the Republic of Ireland has allowed itself to become a puppet of the EU. And Northern Ireland, along with Scotland and other Remainer countries, have willingly been members of the UK. Therefore, they just have to accept the referendum result, just like all the other Remainers do. Because it's time now for the UK to ignore the doommongers that have been put up by the left, by the Remainers, by the media, to tell us that the whole fucking world is going to fall apart in a week if we leave Brexit with a no deal. Instead, they need to listen to the hundreds and hundreds of experts who haven't been given airtime, who haven't been put up on our TV screens, but who are still saying we've got nothing to fear from leaving the EU. In fact, we could positively survive and thrive away from the EU, and we can look forward to a prosperous future as an independent country. But all of this is irrelevant anyway, because quite simply, we voted out, so we are getting out. Now, if this doesn't happen, and somehow they manage to wiggle a second referendum where Remain is on the ballot paper, then this country is going to see unrest, the likes of which it hasn't seen since Maggie Thatcher's poll tax. So, Mr. New Prime Minister, your number one and first mandate is to get the UK out of the EU by the 31st of October. If you are unwilling to do this or incapable of doing this, then do not take on the job, because you'll not be in the job come December. Right, so let's say the new Prime Minister gets us out of Europe, right? He doesn't want to spend too much time patting himself on the back or congratulating himself, because he's still got a lot of work to do. And one of the first things he needs to do is he needs to get a handle on the law and order issues that are blighting Britain today. Issues that are brought about by numerous problems, such as a shortage of police and a rise in so many types of crime, a rise in knife crime. You don't need me to tell you about the knife crime explosion in this country in the last 18 months. And there's a rise in youth crime. There's a rise in drug crime, where young kids are being used as mules to ferry drugs around the country across county lines for evil, dangerous men. There's been a rise in organised crime and foreign organised crime, which has brought people trafficking to our shores. Over the last 10 years, there's been a rise in sexual abuse against young English girls, and we all know who the main perpetrators of that are. There's been a rise in reoffending rates in the UK. There's been a rise in violent protests from both sides. There's just been a general lack of discipline in UK society as a whole, of all ages. And there's been a lack of arrests and convictions. And even when there are convictions, there's been ridiculous, lenient sentences dished out to dangerous criminals. And our prisons are in a complete state. They're overpopulated, they're overcrowded. There's rising tensions from different races and different groups, and there's major unrest in many of our prisons. So how's the new Prime Minister going to solve all these problems? Well, the first thing he needs to do is he needs to take PC out of policing. He needs to ignore the left, ignore the Liberals, ignore the PC brigade. Right? He needs to remove fear from police officers, fear of being branded, fear of reprisals for them carrying out their duties. He needs to stop worrying about equality and diversity in the police force. We need to hire the best people for the job and train them up to do the job the way it needs to be done. Then we need to trust these highly trained officers to do their job. We need to remove all the agendas that have been blighting the police force for the past 10 years. And we need to replace these agendas with a very simple mandate for the police, and it's this. If you see crime, tackle it. If crime is reported to you, investigate it. And in the course of tackling and investigating crime, regardless of the colour or the creed or the race or the religion of any victim of crime or any perpetrator of crime, you treat all these people the same, because this is the only way in which the police can regain the respect and the trust of the British people, which, believe you me, they have lost. Now, how do we get more police officers on the street? Well, that's solvable as well. The Prime Minister needs to remove the thousands and thousands of police officers sat at desks behind computers, protecting people's feelings, looking for and investigating word crimes. Get these officers from behind the desks, get them on our streets combating real crime. Take all the officers hiding behind trees with cameras, get them back in their patrol cars and get them patrolling our streets in our towns and cities. Get rid of the thousands and thousands of useless, powerless PCSOs all over the country and train them, or train more capable people than them, into being proper police officers with powers and send them out on our streets tackling crime. And the Prime Minister can also help the police with some laws, one of which I believe should be this. We need to outlaw face covering in public on our streets in Britain. That's all manners of face covering, from young guys with hoodies and baseball caps to protesters with scarves hiding their identities, Muslim women with burqas and niqabs, even motorcyclists with their helmets unless they're riding the motorbike at the time. Because the police need to see what they're dealing with. We need to see who's around us. Yeah, we need to be able to identify people. CCTV needs to be able to identify people. The police also need to be given unrestricted stop and search powers wherever they see fit, without any questions asked as to its validity or their motive. And when more offenders are caught, which I hope is the case, the Prime Minister needs to be pushing for harsher sentences, because all dangerous, violent criminals in this country need to be taken off our streets for the longest time possible permitted by law. And if there's lenient judges out there dishing out ridiculously lenient sentences to violent offenders, then judges need to be held to account. They need to be chastised and penalised too. Prime Minister needs to carry out an urgent prison review as to the makeup of the prisons, and if necessary, in order to quell racial unrest in prisons, to order segregation of prisons. There needs to be a crackdown of violence and crime and drugs in prison, because these drug crimes in prisons, they aren't confined to the walls of the prison. They spill out onto the UK streets as well. And if there's a shortage of places in prisons, we simply need to build more, because the people of the UK need to feel safe. We need to know that murderers who are given life in prison spend life in prison. Violent offenders who get 10 years in prison spend 10 years in prison. We need an end to this nonsensical notion that nearly all prisoners in this country serve less than half of their sentence. Because in the UK now, we need to have a zero tolerance on all manners of violent, abusive crime, including domestic violence. Because we need to show criminals in this country that if you're on our streets acting like wild animals, you're going to be caged up like a wild animal. And we need to show the people in this country that crime will not go unpunished. We also need to get some form of working punishment and working deterrent into our schools in order to quell crime at the bud, because at the minute there's no discipline in schools. Okay, because we need to make it that deterrent is the number one solution to preventing crime in the first place. So, Mr. Prime Minister, you've got your work cut out, but your number one priority as Prime Minister, as it should be in any country, is for you to do everything you can to keep the law-abiding, hard-working people of Britain safe. Right, another major issue that the Prime Minister needs to sort out, and it's one that basically is the hub of Brexit, and it's immigration, because it's the immigration issue in the UK that's actually caused for the Brexit vote to turn in the favour of leave. So the first thing the new Prime Minister needs to do regarding immigration is tell the people of the UK the truth. He needs to order an immediate census to tell us the makeup of the UK population. with regards to race, ethnicity, religious beliefs, and the actual population itself, the number of people living in the UK. And the results of the census need to come out, and the truth needs to be told to us, not the bullshit we've been told by the last two censuses. Yeah, because only by coming clean with the population, the number of people, and the makeup of that population, can we hope to get the infrastructure in place to cope with them numbers. Now, I know that the true figures of the population and the makeup of the population in this country would shock the people of the UK to the core, but I truly believe it has to be done. We've got to be told, because it's the only way, one of the only ways in which the government can regain the trust of the people and show the people that even with harsh truths, it's willing to tell the people the truth and nothing but the truth. Right, now immigration is here anyway, and there's very little we can do about the immigrants that are already here, except put up with the fact that they are here and deal with the obvious problems that they do bring and will continue to bring. But what we need to do is we need to confine the left's favourite catchphrase to the bin, and that is that diversity is a strength. Now, hundreds of years of history have proven that diversity isn't a strength, that what diversity actually does is it creates divisions. It creates problems. Diversity is divisive. Right, anyway, once the true figures come out about the population and the makeup, yeah, the government can then begin to set, yeah, strict limits on future emigration, yeah, and this time enforce them limits like they've never been enforced in the past. Because to me, this population explosion, which is what I believe it is, it's something that every person in the UK should be extremely, massively worried about. And I think it's so bad that in time, it's going to come to when we need to discuss a way of curbing the rise in population, the rise in unsustainable population growth in the UK. Now, we all know that there's Muslim women out there who are having 4 or 5 kids before they reach the age of 27, 28. We also know that there's white girls out there who've been having children for the past 20 years, basically to put more money in their pockets via the benefit system. At least with the Muslim women, they look after the kids. A lot of these white English girls, the kids are fobbed off to grandma and grandpa. Either way, it's all adding to population explosion, and it's something that needs to be sorted. And maybe there's a time in the future when we will have to discuss a limit on the number of kids a couple can have, and anybody who wishes to have more than that limit would have to pass a fit and proper persons test. Anyway, it's something that definitely needs to be discussed. But when it comes to that, we can do things like that, because now we're no longer beholden to the EU. We can make our own laws, we can make our own rules, we can have our own discussions without restrictions from some asshole in Brussels saying, oh, you can't do that, right? But the most important power that Brexit's going to give us, it's going to give us the ability to control our own immigration policy, yeah? Because the immigration is the most pressing problem in the UK today, and it's time now for the government to sort it out. Now, these are facts that nobody likes to hear, and many, many people will not acknowledge, yeah? But the Labour governments in the past 20 years had a policy which basically amounted to open doors to immigration equals more votes for Labour. And this policy has actually swamped the UK with immigrants. Now, the thing is, it's another reason why we need the truthful figures of the census, because we need to know really what we're dealing with. And it has to be dealt with, because if it's not dealt with, I can guarantee you that in 20, 30 years' time in the UK, we will be reaping what we are now sowing. So I believe that sorting out the immigration mess in the UK today, yeah, is an absolute necessity to ensure that we have got a prosperous future in this country. So now it's over to you, new Mr. Prime Minister. Right, I do believe that they're the 3 main issues that are the Prime Minister's most pressing duties when he comes into power. That's the immigration, law and order and Brexit. But obviously he's going to have a lot more issues to deal with than that. Now, I'm not going to go into detail on all of them. I'm just going to do a quick hit piece on a few to give him a bit of an idea of what he's up against. So the first one basically is the NHS. NHS is under severe strain simply because the population growth is far greater than the infrastructure growth, and patient need increases are far greater than funding increases. Also, there's obviously been an influx of foreign patients, which has added to the strain. Now, this all obviously points to more investment, but the NHS can do its own little bit to help. And one is it can become more efficient. So less bureaucracy, less red tape, and definitely less people walking around its corridors carrying paper, and more doctors and nurses. Last time I went to the hospital a few months ago, I counted far more people in plain clothes carrying around pieces of paper than I did doctors and nurses' uniforms. Okay, another thing the NHS needs to do, it needs to start prioritising UK citizens above others. Right, housing is in the same boat, yeah? The population explosion, the population increase, immigration is all far greater than the number of new homes being built. Now, we keep hearing about all these promised hundreds of thousands of affordable homes, right? Mr. Prime Minister, start fucking building them, right? And again, yeah, in housing, we need to prioritise UK citizens, okay? Because the UK citizens are becoming more and more deflated and more depressed every time they see, yeah, that non-British people are being given preferential treatment, right? And this isn't just a perception. This is a reality that's happening all over this country. Right, another system that needs a bit of a shake-up is the benefit system, where it's being abused left, right and centre. You've got foreign people in this country claiming benefit for children who don't even live in this country. Yeah, you've got partially disabled people claiming full disability, with people afraid to say anything for being afraid of being called anti-disability and discriminatory. But these people are depriving other people of care. And in the housing benefit system, you've got families who are genuinely a family, man, woman, children, who are taking up 2 properties on benefits when they could live in one easily and free up a house for, no doubt, a homeless family somewhere. These are just minor points, but there's hundreds and hundreds of examples of these things going on. Right, on top of these, you've got transport issues, you've got education, and you've got policing, and these all need more funding. And it all points to an overpopulation of the country in relation to the available infrastructure. I'm not saying the country's overpopulated, I'm saying it's overpopulated in respect of how much infrastructure we've got. So we need to build up the infrastructure to cope with this extra population, and it all needs investment. So that begs the question, have we got any money? Right, well, for a start, we're leaving Brexit. So straight away, we've got £39 billion on the table here. Okay, we've put away something like 15 to 20 billion to prepare for a no deal. So we'll add that to the pot. Yeah. Now, there's tens and tens of millions of pounds once we leave the EU that we won't be sending across the channel anymore. So that's hundreds and hundreds billions a year again. We'll put that on the pot. Yeah. In a previous video, I've explained why I believe the BBC should be debanded and defunded. So there's another billion plus a year that's going on my pot. Yeah. All around the country, there's thousands and thousands of unnecessary jobs. Yeah. Jobs that are basically agenda-driven jobs. Jobs that have been invented with the simple reason of just promoting equality and showing equality in the workplace. Them jobs can go and be added to the pot. One example is around this country there's thousands and thousands of translators being paid a hefty wage. Now if you come to this country and you want our benefits, or you want our healthcare, or you want to open a bank account, or you want housing benefits, yeah, then learn to speak the language so you can ask for what you want yourself. And until you're able to master the language of English, yeah, bring a friend or bring a relative who can translate for you. Don't expect me and other people like me out of our taxes to pay for your translations. So thousands and thousands of translators all around the country, £30,000 a year. We're looking at another 100 million a year on the pot here. How else can we save some money? Get rid of all the PCSOs who are just powerless and doing nothing in our towns and cities. The ones who aren't capable to be turned into police officers. Give me all their wages. That's going on the pot. Yeah? All the extravagant spending on MPs' residences. For instance, £3,000 for an antique desk for an MP's office. Give me that money. That's going on the pot. Yeah? Why are we spending £2.5 million this year renovating the home of, who was it? The Duke and Duchess of Kent, whichever two them are. £2.5 million to renovate their home on the pot. In fact, just a little footnote, why have we even got a royal family? In this country, yeah, a lot of people, yeah, refer to Islam as a medieval ideology. What do you think royalty and a royal family is? It's a medieval ideology which we are still holding strong to today in the year 2019, which is costing us billions of pounds. Make any sense? Right, how else can we make some money? Right, well, I'm not going to do the old Conservative Party nonsense, which is to tax cuts for the rich. I'm going to do the opposite. I want my Prime Minister to take another 1 to 2% in taxes of the 1 to 2% highest earners in this country, because in doing so, you will free up tens of thousands of people in this country from poverty. How can we live in a loving, equal Christian society where people can earn enough money to last them 1,000 lifetimes and other people can't afford a pint of milk for the children twice a week? So yeah, let's put another 1-2% of the top 1-2% earners tax on my pile. There it goes. Right, we've got a big pile here. We've got a good head start. It's just proof that the answer to all the UK's problems are within the UK. Okay? All it takes is willpower. The will to do something right. The will to take hard decisions. The will to upset a few rich people along the way. The will to slap the left to one side. The will to ignore the biased media. Okay? We need a leader who's strong. We need a leader with convictions, with the strength of his convictions, who's perfectly willing to do them things I've just said, who's willing to go that extra mile, to brush aside any opposition. And the Labour don't provide much fucking opposition, so there's not much to that. Yeah? To do what's right for the UK. If we have a leader with a set of balls and the willpower and the conviction, and we have this big pile of money as a head start, and we have one of the greatest countries in the world, yeah? Do we need the EU to survive, to prosper? Do we fuck? Right? The thing is, drastic measures, yeah, are required when situations are drastic. Now, I don't believe just yet that the situations in the UK are drastic. But if we carry on the path we're going, led by the loony left, then 10, 15, 20 years down the time, we're going to be in a very drastic situation, and we're going to be in a country that's horrible to live in for our children and their children. So take a bow, Mr. Prime Minister, take up your post, yeah, and get fucking cracking. Until next time, guys, feel free to share this video. I don't often ask to share. I'm just happy to know that I represent millions of people like me, just hardworking, normal guys in the UK. But I'd like this video to get out there a bit far and wide, just so I can see, just to confirm the fact that I do believe I'm representing the normal, hardworking, law-abiding Britain. Take care, guys. See you later.